welcome to the Fan of History. Today we're going to talk about the events of the 990s BC. I'm the Fan of History, I'm just a fan of history. I'm not a scientist, I have no formal education, I just have studied a lot of history. This is the first of the decade reports, and I suggest that you watch the video The Great Civilizations of the World in 1000 BC first, because that is sort of setting the stage for the 10th century BC. And this is a very long time ago. You can't really be sure about what is mythological and what is actually historical. But I will try to address this as we go along. There are also very few events happening here. Eventually I will have to go to shorter periods than a decade, but decade seems fine right now. This is probably the decade which has the least data. There might be others in the 10th century itself. Alright, the Lapita Culture, sailing around in their canoes, have reached Tonga. And they came originally from the Bismarck archipelago. This is an example of what archaeology can teach us, and that not everything we know comes from history or written records. So what is actually going on in Europe? Well, nothing is going on in Europe. Nothing that we know about in this decade, because Europe is way behind. In Israel, we have to rely on the Bible, and archaeology and history from other sources have not yet caught up to the Bible, so we don't really know. But this is the traditional date. There are some other dates very close to this one where David actually selects to have Jerusalem as the capital of Israel after a conflict, and Jerusalem was traditionally within the tribe of Benjamin. And there are some remains in Jerusalem which could be from King David's palace. So this might be a historical event, or it might not. Sorry if I'm offending anyone. I'm trying to put as little religion into this as possible, but yeah, these are events described in the Bible. So what's going on in Assyria? Ashurabi II is still going strong, and he's working on re-establishing Assyria, but Assyria is still very small, still confined to the heartland, but the world doesn't know what it's about to face. The third rise of Assyria, the Neo-Assyrian Empire, coming soon. Back in China, the Sui Dynasty, its third ruler, King Kang, dies in 995 BC, or doesn't. Maybe he dies in 978 BC. There are, for the early Sui kings, 2 different dates on everyone. So King Kang was a good and strong ruler, and he improved situations for the Sui and for the inhabitants of China. But his son is not the same kind of guy. Here is King Zhao of the Sui Dynasty, the 4th ruler of the Sui Dynasty of China. And look at that amazing hat! I think it's also amazing that we have these pictures, these drawings of these ancient kings, and I wish we had them for more of these rulers. But it's like Egypt, Assyria, and China that does this at this time. So King Zhao comes to Dad's set table. The Sui Dynasty is strong, and the tributary state of Chu to the south. Oh god, I'm slaughtering these pronunciations, sorry about that. But the tributary state of Chu to the south, from that tributary state, the plan is to conquer more territory to the south. So the attention of the Sui military, superior to anything nearby, is directed to the south. But it turns out that King Zhao, he is not very interested in war, he's not very interested in administration, he's not interested in boring, dangerous stuff. He loves pleasures. And there is a traditional danger in China when the emperor turns to pleasures. There was another emperor that built a river of wine that had an island in the middle where the trees were made of meat. This King Zhao doesn't go that far, but he's into like maybe building a zoo, looking at the rare birds and animals, and it's like that fascinates him. And China is very rich in nature, so he's like amazed at all these interesting things that lives in nature, and he's not at all interested in the tributary state of Chu and conquest to the south. And we'll see how that turns out. In India, it's still very early for Kuru and Panchala and the Vedic states, and we don't really know a lot. If you have any great sources for ancient India at this time, let me know, because there are very few that I found. And the great period of Kuru Panchala is yet in the future. In 994 BC, Archippus, the Archon of Athens, dies and is succeeded by his son Thersippus. So Athens is around already, and when I started researching, I was surprised that Athens actually already existed. But it seems that Athens have existed for a long, long time before this. Athens seems to have survived the darkness and the invasion of the Dorians and the Bronze Age collapse. Or did it? But there are archaeological finds in Athens that are way older than this. And Athens has a line of kings, a list of kings, that goes back to way, many, many hundred years before this. Of course, these kings could be mythological. Archippus himself is interesting because he is the third of the archons, as opposed to the kings that were before him. But scientists think that his two predecessors could also have been kings. He might be the first archon of Athens. And I tried to find out what the difference between a king and an archon is, but I don't really know. So if you know the difference between a king and an archon, the kings are not the tyrants, they will come later. If you know the difference between an Athens king and an Athens archon in this century, please let me know, because I don't know. But there are two different titles, so there must be some sort of difference. The Olmecs. Yeah, the Olmecs have a great civilization going in Mexico, and we don't know what they did because we can't read their writing. And actually there is very little Olmec writing found, but between 2002 and 2006 they found a lot of writing. They found what has been found pretty much. And they seem to be able to date this writing to between 1100 BC and 900 BC. The Kasyakal block there has some writing that seems to be older than the Mayan hieroglyphs and seems to be an ancestor of the Mayan hieroglyphs. And someday maybe we will be able to read about the Olmecs, but these reports from from America will be very boring, because very few events this far back are dated. As opposed to Egypt, Amenemope. I still can't pronounce the guy's name. Here he is in his death mask, much, much younger than he actually was when he died. In 992, he does die. He's a pharaoh of the 21st dynasty. And as I told you before, he's the son of Susenes I. His tomb is considerably smaller and less wealthy than his father's. And there's also the tomb is at Tanis. And King Siamun, who will replace the guy who replaces Amenemope, he moves Amenemope's mummy to Susenes' tomb for some reason. We'll talk about that when we come to King Siamun. But what really happened here? Amenemope was an old guy. He could have died of old age. But his replacement is surprising. The pharaoh had plenty of wives and should have a successor. But the guy who succeeds Amenemope is not a relative of him. So he might have been murdered. He might have been usurped. because the guy who takes power in Egypt is a military man. He is Osorkon the Elder, and this is one of the most mysterious pharaohs there is, especially from this late date of Egypt's history. We know that he reigned, it's also disputed, of course, until 986. 1001, hello, that's wrong. That's a disputed date. He is son of Shoshenq, and Shoshenq is the great chief of the Ma. The Ma is a Libyan tribe, and look at this perfect map. So Libya is like everything to the west of Egypt. There is also a pharaoh called Akeperes Setepenre, and quite recently they actually made the connection that Osorkon the Elder is Akeperes Setepenre, and that sort of made Osorkon real. They didn't even believe he had existed. The fact that Osorkon is a Libyan is a trailer for the 22nd dynasty, who will be all Libyans. But power will go back to Egyptians again. And I think that the Ma, it's a tribe of Libyan warriors that had been mercenaries. They had worked for Egypt for a long time. So at this time, Osorkon the Elder was probably almost totally an Egyptian. He was assimilated into the culture. And there is we don't have his death mask. I am not sure if his tomb has even been discovered. So we can't get a picture of him. Of course, we are close to 1000 BC, and there are some events in the world that is very hard today that people just put it happened around 1000 BC. So I figured I should go through those. The Iron Age starts. The Latins come to Italy from the Danube region, from the east. And the Latins will be very important in our story later. Priene in Western Anatolia is founded. The Iranian peoples enter Persia. The Villanovans occupy the northern and western Italy and sort of have power there. They are the precursor of the Etruscans. The Phoenicians invent the alphabet. We'll talk more about the Phoenicians in upcoming episodes. Ancient Japan is still in their Stone Age period, the Jomon period, and they actually managed to start to cultivate rice. Japan is sadly far behind the other great civilizations here. There is pretty much not anything happening in Japan at this time. Some cultures start in the Andes, and these are also way behind the Olmecs. And the Illyrians are first entering the scene. So thank you. This is the first decade report. I will do this for all the decades of the 10th century and probably beyond that, and maybe even before. Let me know what you think about the decade report. Do you like this format? Is there anything else you would like to see? So let me know in the comments. And thank you for watching.